What's up, everybody? The Game 2K2 here once again. The comic genre has truly taken off, hasn't it? Over the past 50 years, hundreds of comic book films have released between both live action and animated films, but I'm here to choose the 10 best in that extremely long list. And because this list is so long, I'm only going to be choosing between English language comic book films, like Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, etc. I am familiar with French comics and Magna comics, and I do realize there have been adaptations to some of those comics as well, but those films are tougher to attain. Okay, before I start, let me just give the usual warning. If you don't agree with some of my choices, please do not get angry. In fact, I'm willing to read what your top 10 list would be. Alright, let's not waste any more time. Let's begin. Number 10. Elektra. Now, I know a lot of people are going to argue with me over this film because Elektra was not only panned by critics but also a lot of fans. But I actually kind of liked Elektra. Elektra was really an unexpected film because while the character was popular when teaming up with other comic book characters, the character proved to be unsuccessful when she was finally put into her own comic. So it was hard to believe that the film would be based on just her. I was one of very few people who saw this in theaters. Literally, I saw it in its second weekend in theaters, and I was one of only 6 people in that theater. I actually found the film to be very clever. It took a much more serious tone than many other comic book films. There was hardly any comedy, and the action was top-notch. And to me, that's why Elektra stands out so well in this genre. It's a film that I really think a lot of fans took the wrong way. There's so much imagination in this film and really a lot of creativity, and I really love the story that the film tells. For those who've only seen this movie once and didn't like it, please just watch it a second time and really read into the story and into its characters, and I think you'll find a movie that's truly great. Number 9. Men in Black. A lot of people have forgotten or just plain don't know that Men in Black was based on a comic. I was stunned that so many people, and some of them being comic book fans, had no clue that Men in Black was a comic. Well, to be fair, its original publisher, Aircell Comics, was not exactly the most popular publisher on the market, so maybe I shouldn't be so surprised. However, when the Men in Black was purchased by Marvel Comics, everyone at Marvel saw potential for an actual movie, and in 1997 we got The Men in Black, starring Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, and it was simply classic. Now, while I've known about the comics for a long time, I've never actually read any of them, so I don't know how loyal this movie is, but it doesn't really matter. This movie is funny, action-packed, and filled with over-the-top looking characters, awesome special effects, a great story, and 2 lead actors that have tremendous chemistry with each other. It was rather funny seeing Will Smith in this, especially since he was just coming off another Alien movie, Independence Day, but he gives a great performance. This is simply one of those movies that I don't mind seeing over and over again. In fact, it's constantly shown on TV, especially on TBS, and I watch it almost every time it's on. So overall, Men in Black is a film that has finally earned the right to be called a classic. Number 8. Batman Beyond: The Return of the Joker. This is one of those animated films that really deserve to be released in theaters. It's that good. Now, Batman Beyond the series, while criticized before its debut, was met with critical acclaim and was very popular with fans, which is why I was a little surprised that it did not get a theatrical release. This movie has all the elements: great voice acting, wonderful animation, and above all else, an incredible story. Literally, this story has so many wonderful twists and turns that there are actually some really cool, unpredictable elements to the story that makes it a standout amongst animated films. The revealing of the Joker in this film is one of my favorite reveals, and Mark Hamill gives a classic voice performance. So overall, animated comic book films always go back and forth between being good or bad. However, Return of the Joker is one of very few that is absolutely great. Number 7. The Mask. The Mask has always been a standout to me for 2 reasons. The first reason is just the imagination of the film. It's a live-action movie that you almost forget is a live-action movie. The film is so goofy and so cartoonish that you almost feel like you're watching a full-motion comic book. The second is the fact that it's one of very few comic book films that's actually loved for going against its original source material. The Mask comics were actually very dark comics. They were both violent and very gritty. In fact, the Mask character was actually really creepy and scary, where the movie took on a much more lighthearted tone and went for kind of a live-action Looney Tune type of movie. I'm going to be honest, I hate the Mask comics. I got a chance to read a few of them at Albuquerque Comic Con last year, and I didn't like them. But I love this movie. I love the Looney Tunes, and I loved classic films like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and that's the reason why I love this movie. The Mask is like all of that on steroids, and Jim Carrey was easily the best choice for the main role, because he truly brings the main character to life. This is a movie that I feel needs to be shown on TV more often. Number 6. Superman the movie. This movie, to me, is the only Superman worth watching in this series. Superman 2 I found to be okay to watch once, and I never really cared for 3, 4, or Superman Returns. For some reason, despite the fact that it was made in 1978, Superman just has a timeless feel to it, and is almost like Star Wars in a lot of ways, because it doesn't matter how old it is, it's just as good now as it was then. Christopher Reeves was the perfect Superman, and the rest of the cast fits just as well. Gene Hackman, Marlon Brando, just a great cast that made this movie what it is. Another really impressive element to the movie is the effects used in the movie. This is during a time of optical effects, and I have to admit, the effects of Superman flying looks pretty damn good for the 1970s, especially considering the budget that this film was on. It's really unfortunate that there really hasn't been a Superman movie that's lived up to the first movie's standards. Since we're currently in an era where loyal comic book films are no longer hard to come by, I would love to see a full-length movie that goes through Superman's origins. Number 5. Iron Man. I have to be honest, my expectations for Iron Man were very low before its release. Its director, Jon Favreau, didn't quite have the track record that fits this type of film, and Robert Downey Jr.'s career was so far down the tubes that there seemed to be no recovery. So when I went into theaters to see it, I expected one of the worst movies ever made. But like everyone else, when I walked out of theaters, I was amazed by how incredible it was. Iron Man is very loyal to its source material, and Robert Downey Jr. proved that he was the perfect choice for the movie. Also, I was very impressed with the look of Iron Man. I was afraid that I was going to see something similar to what Shaq wore in Steel, but it turned out great. The story is also very good. I was very impressed that they managed to keep it loyal to the comics, but also made it pretty down-to-earth as well. So overall, even if you've never read the Iron Man comics, you will still love Iron Man. It's a truly action-packed adventure that will keep your eyes glued to the screen.